Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Mastoma Viddishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us. May that one nourish us. May our studies be full of vigor, enthusiasm, and efficiency. May we have strength and illumination of mind. May we not unnecessarily cavil. And peace, peace, peace be unto all. So I'm taking as my reference Kathopanishad, and it's the second chapter, third section, sixth stanza. In advance of that, the commentator asks, how is he, capital H, to be known, and what is the need of his knowledge? Two questions are asked. And so the sixth stanza answers this. It begins Indriyanam pratak utpatya mananam, having known the dissimilarity of the indriyas, the senses, that originate separately, as also their rising and setting. The intelligent person does not grieve. We find a similar passage in the Bhagavad Gita. The wise grieve neither for the living nor the dead. And in modern psychology, this becomes a difficulty because bereavement is supposed to happen. There is a wonderful expert on death and dying and bereavement, the late Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, medical doctor. And she has delineated all the psychological components necessary in the bereavement process to make grieving healthy. But here we are told that the wise don't grieve for the living nor the dead, and the intelligent person doesn't grieve at all. So is there some difference in yogic psychology and modern Western psychology? The greatest pain that we will have is to do with death and dying. This is why in the Bhagavad Gita, the first chapter begins with essentially a nervous breakdown, but it is in reaction to the fear of death, not the person's own death, but the death of others. And as we advance in age, then the closet of death becomes closer. And we have to wonder what will happen. But the commentator asks this wonderful question, how is he to be known and what is the need of his knowledge? And curiously enough, the reply is having known the dissimilarity of the senses that originate separately as also their rising and setting, intelligent man does not grieve. That means the answer to this question is the use of all of this is to avoid pain, the pain of grief. Of all the impulses in man, the most enduring one, the one that we prize the most, is happiness. Everybody is looking for happiness. I always say, I never met a man or a woman who said, Swami, my goal is to be unhappy. Everybody would like to be happy. What we find at the moment when we say we're happy is that there are temporary conditions where we are at the moment happy. In other words, if my health is okay, then I'm happy. But as soon as I get pain in the back or arthritis on the knee or something, then I cease to be happy. A doctor's prayer should be, may everyone fall sick so I can have business. A patient's prayer should be, may I not see the doctor. And poor God is sitting there with his fax machine or email wondering, what should I do? So how do we tackle this great impulse to be happy? We are only happy if our bank account is full, if our health is good, if all the conditions are right. And we know it's not lasting. We know it's like a football. You have to kick it in the air. When it comes down, you have to kick it back up again if you want to stay up. So where does this unhappiness arise? We have 5 senses. That is, we are only informed about 5 areas in the whole universe. And when the energy moves outwards through these sense organs, they arrive at the sense objects. And it is our reaction to this broadly speaking world, that creates happiness or unhappiness. How to control this reaction is really the key question. The senses are dissimilar. The object, dissimilar to what? Dissimilar to one unity of existence that stands there. If pain arises because the birthright, a flow of consciousness, flows through the sense organs to their objects, and that is the source of our grief, then is it possible for a moment, systematically, scientifically, to stay this consciousness and stop it going out? Surely, if we were able to do that, we've avoided the source of our unhappiness. And so, how to do it is firstly to be informed. The sense organs have no permanency in them, and what we see may not be the full range of our experience. We know that our experience is limited in these 5 ways. We only have these 5 photographs of the universe, but there may be much more. So we have a unit called body and mind, a mind that is used for foolish thinking, a jumping mind, and a body that can creak at any moment in time. What's the whole point? With this vehicle and with the shadow of death in a cupboard somewhere, fear of death, then we have to ask this question. Are all our pain and problems come from these reactions from outside? Somebody praises us, we feel flattered and happy. But the ego is so fragile, as soon as somebody criticizes us or says, Swamiji, that was a very bad talk, we didn't like it at all, we fell asleep. Oh, what a pity, what a pity. We go into a misery. And the exaggerated condition of Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita is more than that. He's on the verge of nervous breakdown. All the symptoms of a psychological nervous breakdown are in operation. Shaking, unable to even hold a bow, his weapon, lack of concentration, tears flowing. All the symptoms of profound grief are there. It's a necessary step, of course. We were discussing yesterday that the Bhagavad Gita teaching really starts with the first chapter, not the second, as most people think, because it's necessary to have this level of depression. It's necessary to go to the rock bottom of grief in order for us to come up. When people are depressed and complain, my reply is, blessed are you, because you're now entering the first chapter of your life, a new chapter for the possibility of renewal. So this Arjuna Vishali Yoga, this first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, dealing with this painful situation, allows us to understand that painful situations gives us much more benefit, because at some point we have to step back and reevaluate things and ask this question: consciousness that is our birthright, flowing out through the senses and coming back with information that creates a wave of reaction that makes us psychologically unhappy. How can we avoid this? So the eyes bring us beautiful pictures, the ears bring us beautiful praises and flattery, in large measures. But the sense objects in front, which we call the world, are registered through the senses and the components of the sense organs. And the components of the objects are exactly the same. They have the same molecular material, the same chemistry. And the most important principle in Vedanta is to understand what is their composition. Can we find a roadmap by going through the key components of these materials and find where they come from? We find they come from a creative mind, a cosmic creative mind whose will enables and manifests and motivates these 5 components that arrive as the objects and the organs. When we know this, then we also know the true nature of what we are seeing. So having known this dissimilarity of the senses, how are the sense organs produced? Certain waves are there, coming from a creative mind, a cosmic mind. And inside it, driven by it, is thought. And thought has an internal creative capacity. It has certain powers that manifest in these wave forms. The Taittiriya Upanishad is very clear about what these forms are, how they are formed. Let us deal with how they are and see if we can take a systematic journey back. These 5 characteristics are there, and they are wave systems. That is, when you look at an object, you should be able to see the outer crust of it, the internal wave dimension of it, the cosmic mind that religion calls God, and its creative capacity, and know that when we arrive there, we can issue a thought of our own that manifests as combinations of these waves and crystallizes as the world in front of us and creates a happy environment for us. Creating our own paradise and happy world like this, can we not do this if we are able to know that we have this creative capacity and that the creative region, as it were, is a universal mind of unity from which all these waves combine and eventually crystallize. We have an example of that, of course. All the clouds in the air weren't originally clouds. They weren't originally water vapor. They played a drama. From all the seas, the heat of the sun allowed water vapor to rise and collate. And when the pressure became too much, it burst down as rainfall, leaving the salt behind in the evaporation, and came down as water and flowed as rivers and went back into the sea. That circular, cyclical drama is being taking place. Is thought something like that? Is our world something like that? And if it is so, then we have no room to grieve on the one hand. When more faculties are unfolded, we find more capacity, more creative capacity. When we find a condition of solidity, technically we call this Prithivi, uselessly translated as earth. Not earth, it's a quality of solidity. And all of these waves that we call tanmatras have the capacity to bifurcate. The earth bifurcates, this element bifurcates. Its energetic quality is known as magnetism. That is combined from another wave system called Vayu. Called water. Uselessly translated as water, what we call by force electricity, combine the two, electromagnetism. The ancient sages understood and knew this. Only modern science has added 2 more weak and strong nuclear forces. And we may find that these are just variations of electromagnetism anyway. And they bifurcate so that we can catch them, producing all noses that smell and producing all mouths that can taste. And that comes from the capacity to radiate, what we call Agni. Some forces there, resulting from a combination of the other two, Vayu and Akasha. All uselessly translated. Akasha being translated as space or something like that. But actually, it is potential matter. We find it as gravitational force. The urge to remain undivided. If you ask, why is gravity there? No scientist will be able to tell you. Why do books fall on the floor? Nobody knows. They just do it. Newton's apple fell on his head. He knew there was something called gravity, but why is it there? Why is falling there? Why is that law there? Is it not because there is behind it a will not to divide, to unite everything? And this is something like the electromagnetic wave system. It is present everywhere. It's all penetrating. And it is potential. It is hardly moving. In that sense, it is also called a vyakta, that is unmanifest. There are descriptions of unmanifest in a number of different areas. Unmanifest because it's extremely subtle. It has the capacity to bifurcate as all sounds. So sound is the most primordial wave that we have, a vibration. And the cosmic mind's vibration we call Om. That Omkara, in other variations, with combinations and permutations, arrives under a kind of unseen line, a divided area. Those who understand a little bit of modern physics will recognize some terms. Decoherence is a term now adopted by modern science. It says that the normal condition of things is combinations of waves that routinely interfere with each other and are spaced out everywhere, not confined in any way. But at some point, they crystallize as a massive world where we don't see these waves. We don't see these subtle tanmatras. We only see their crystallized effect. What a funny world it is. But it doesn't last long. We have this fear of death that produces the most profound grief. Let us analyze this a little bit further. This text says, if you know the dissimilarity of the senses, with what? With that entity that remains while these and their products all change. And we can experience this change in a wonderful sliding drama every night. We call it sleep. Gliding across the borders from this waking state with all its senses that produces their grief. We glide across the border where the internal senses continue to play. You know, from Swami Vivekananda's Raja Yoga, uses a grand illustration. In his day, no cars were there, carriages were there. If I'm speaking, he says, and you hear these carriages go by, you won't hear my voice, you'll hear the carriages. Why? Because the attention is steered somewhere else. It's not the sense organs as they are. It's not the physical organic organs. Because you can close your eyes while sleeping. Small children do this. You see their brother or sister sleeping. They advance, they open the eyelid. The eyeball stares out, but nothing is seen. All the internal organs are there, and the external organs are only manifested instruments. The internal instruments are still kept alive. We still see, we still hear, we touch, we taste, we experience all the things in a different kind of world. And so there's a rising and setting that originates separately. Separately from what? From the thing that stands still and registers it. An eternal witness consciousness stands there, not changed, not moving, not subject to variables, not happy or unhappy, standing there as a witness. Its job is to see. It cannot be seen. Its job is to see. a seer cannot be seen, a knower cannot be known. That we call the immortal self. And there are varying terms for it, which are descriptive to help us understand something that's abstract. Atman, self. But we normally interpret the self in a different way. We normally interpret it in a small world of a waking experience. And then wonder why we grieve, not understanding. Every night we have a dress rehearsal for death. What is there to fear? We glide across the border and go into a drama where we play with all kinds of scenes and objects. Time is there, space is there, a registration of all that is there. Same thing in a waking state. And then at one moment, we glide across the border still, and there are no distinctions anywhere, no movement in time, no parts in space, one without a second. And from the waking point of view, we call it sleep. But from the real point of view, we call it sitting in God's lap. Sitting in our natural abode. So to advance, as it were, toward God, to this entity that remains still, we call it in the religious terms God, then a progression has to be made. We have to allow the normal sense organs, so-called, in the waking state to set, like the sun sets. And then allow it to rise. It rises by itself. And that is called a dream. And allow it to set again. That is called dreamless sleep. So having known the dissimilarity of the senses with what? With this witness self that doesn't rise and doesn't fall. And that originated separately from that. They're rising and they're setting. Now we understand it. How they rise, how they set. The intelligent man who knows this starts off having known. Who knows this? Why should he grieve? Why should he fear? What is there to fear? What is the second thing that is there to fear? Standing there in this creative aspect, nothing to fear. And we can label it differently now. So what is that one who stands there beaming, just giving this understanding of an abode of peace, that's all. God standing there. We call it nothing. We call it ignorance. We call it darkness. We call it sleep. We call it blank. The misunderstanding, because we're judging it from a world which should be not like that, should be highly active, full of different components, full of bodies, minds, individualities, problems, difficulties, struggles. Not a world at all like that, which is just standing there, nothing else. God standing there. The abode of Ishvara, the Lord. In a dream, we don't call it dream, therefore. We call it Hiranyagarbha, is the technical term. That golden seed, that cosmic mind, just standing there in creative mode. And our registration from the waking point of view is dream is less real. And dreamless sleep is less real still. No, you have to reverse it. If you're going into the subtle area of thought, of creative waves, is dream. And if you go into just standing there in a state of creative potentiality, where consciousness alone is there as peace. And anything that happens on this microcosm has to happen on the macrocosm. It's a law. So think of it universally also. This whole universe, therefore, as seen through the eyes, is like seeing through a telescope. We can look through a telescope at the object, but we can look at the telescope also, and we can look away from it because I'm not the telescope. This dissociation is what we call this dissimilarity between the senses. Then going on to the commentary here. So it begins. Their nature, nature of these senses being essentially dissimilar to the nature of the self that is extremely pure, absolute. The senses are not pure, they are all tainted, contrasting, black and white, good and bad, morality, immorality, judging, criticizing, feeling that there is something we have to improve. If you want to spend your life improving and criticizing and changing, then God will give you infinite resources to do that, infinite objects to do that. At the end, you say, Lord, I never had time for spiritual life. No, you wanted to change everything and everybody. I gave you lots of material for it. Wanting, seeing that the world is not perfect, and seeing that we have to have a means and an observation capacity to observe all the gaps and holes and fill them all. Then what is God? The creator of holes. We are building an ashram. Today we installed 3 heaters. I got the photographs this morning, and I see they're trying to surprise me, but nothing surprises me. So I see that they're repainting the ceiling of the shrine room. And after 2 years, 2.5 years, it required it. See? So I returned to a bright ceiling, and I have to feign surprise. Oh, how fantastic! See, but I already saw the video on it. So the wonderful thing, you see. So even in the holiest of places, we find these impurities, and we find scope to criticize or change things. Things are not exactly right. What a stupid God it is who made a world with holes. Lord, what are you doing? I'm filling the holes from yesterday's creation. And then what will you do next? I'll make more holes for the next day's filling. What a funny universe. So we should accept that there is something deep within us that stands still and doesn't change and is dissimilar from the senses and is extremely pure, absolute, doesn't require improvement, doesn't require change. This is a key to what we call spiritual healing. Don't look to change anything or change anybody. Now, I'm aware that I'm talking to psychologists and doctors on a frequent basis, 3 of them sitting here. So I have to be cautious in my language and say, from my personal point of view. From my personal point of view, we don't start off with disease and ill health. We start off with perfection. Everything is full and free and perfect. What is our job to maintain that? Supposing we maintain that, would you have such a labored National Health Service? Keep the body as it's supposed to be. What is the body if not a reflection, as simply a combination series of waves that arrive as a body in good condition as it arrives? Why should we think that there's anything wrong with it? So maintenance of health? No. Personally, I don't worry about it. I worry about cleaning. How should I clean? I have to clean the body, clean the mind. Once the body is clean, God looks after it from there on. God made the world and saw that it was good. Only we see it as bad and feel it needs correction. But Jesus never saw it like this. Around him was foreign conquest, Romans dominating the Jewish people. Around him was lepers. So leprosy disease was there, blindness was there, lameness was there, even death was there. And he didn't see it in this way. He saw it with a different kind of wiring. It is all full and free and perfect. When I look there with penetrating vision, I see a full and free and perfect. And when I see that, the lame man walks, the blind man sees. Because it's all a wave system. And I'm tuned into the cosmic mind. And that cosmic mind is all free and perfect and full. Nothing more to see. As soon as that happens, a penetrating vision comes the other way. A correcting faculty comes the other way. That perfection comes through and changes everything. And people stand astounded and say, what a miracle. No, I'm only bringing you back to your original abode, that's all. This dreamless sleep is there. Oh Lord, had you been here, Lazarus would not have died. Jesus says, no, he but sleepeth. Immediately, Lazarus wakes up. And people say, what a miracle. Jesus' point of view, what a normality. It's already full and free and perfect. Why should we see it as defective? Our interpretation of the world is like that. It creates sorrow for ourselves. So it is pure, it is absolute, and consciousness, says the commentator here, Shankaracharya. Is this alone? Similarly, knowing there, Udayastamaya, rising and setting, that is their creation and dissolution. In relation to what? In relation to waking and sleep states, as belonging to them only and not to the self. They don't belong to the self. You may think that you are the car, and you may be convinced because it's a Tesla car and drives itself. But actually, you get in the car, you know it. You get out of the car, you know it. When it requires recharging, you know it, because of the dissimilarity between the car and yourself. If we don't know that similarity, we'll get grief. We'll get unhappiness. So, Dhiraha, the intelligent man, na shochati, everywhere in the scriptures you'll find it, na shochati, does not grieve. What is the main practical function of all this philosophy? So that you get to a point where you no longer seek the happiness. You don't say, I wish I was happy. It doesn't arise. So, for the constantly uniform nature, says the commentator, of the self, being unchangeable, the self cannot be the cause of sorrow. It is the external world that is the cause of sorrow. But the external world is nothing but the tanmatras, and we don't see it like this. These subtle waves in progression, bifurcating into the sense organs that catch it, and the subtle waves, and eventually coming to a line, as it were, a border in the waking state that gives us what we call decoherence, away from this wave system that is operating smoothly and nicely according to its own laws and patterns. And then from our side, we don't see it. And so when we look at the Sankhya categories, 24 categories, below that line, we have 16. 5 organs of information, sense organs, eyes, ears, touch, taste, etc. And the 5 organs of information, the reactions to it. And every being, including bacteria, has the same arrangement. It knows its environment. It has an internal arrangement which knows how to react to that environment. In this way, it survives. But is it happy? I never asked a bacteria, are you happy? But it struggles. When you see it, you see that it wants to get food. It wants to self-mutate. It wants to do all these things. It wants to maintain an environment, and it knows how to do it. That knowledge is within it, because its fundamental essence is existence itself. And its fundamental essence is consciousness. Don't think that there's a brainless bacteria. The brainless bacteria, even more so, the brainless virus, is giving us a lot of trouble. And then there's another text that is quoted, the knower of the self crosses over sorrow. We find this in the chapter 7, first section, 3rd stanza. The knower of the self crosses over this barrier of sorrow. The self in relation to which the dissimilarity of the senses has been pointed out is not to be realized outside, says Shankaracharya. For it is the inmost self, not just of you, but of all. Because how can there be any dividedness? If there's a dividedness, then sorrow arises. There's another one to oppose you, another one to fear. How can that be? And that's being said. Primary difference between the Sankhya philosophy, Sankhya and Yoga philosophies, and the Vedanta is there's a generosity of spirit to say we can put the whole of nature into one thing called Prakriti. But we're not generous enough to do that with each Purusha, each individual self. Purusha in you, Purusha in me, Purusha everywhere. And Vedanta doesn't agree with that conclusion. Because the question arises from the Sankhya point of view, if it's all one thing, when you're unhappy, I'm unhappy. Not realizing that this is because, all this arises because of interaction of the senses and their objects, and actually the material is the same. What is this body? The sense organs. What is it made from? What is the mind made from? Yesterday's vegetable soup and potato food. All right. Then the next stanza will go on. The mind is superior to the organs. So let us give you now a whole range of things so that we can use it as a stepladder and go backwards. What is evolution? Evolution is unfolding. You take a piece of paper, any paper you like, you take this piece of paper and you can fold it like that. When you unfold it, it's not a different piece of paper. Same piece of paper is there. What is this evolution in its pristine sense? Evolution means unfolding. When you unfold something, you don't make anything new. So Charles Darwin saw the trap. In his famous book, Origin of the Species, he hardly mentions this term evolution. It's picked up by Huxley and others, Thomas Huxley and others. And now we think, oh, evolution is something to do with a purposeless thing, nothing to do with unfolding. The Swami Vivekananda makes it very clear. A more modern writer, modernish, with a Catholic priest, Jesuit priest, Théard de Chardin, Frenchman. He was a paleontologist. And he understood this, that you cannot have evolution without involution. You cannot have a tree that evolves from a non-tree. You cannot have a conscious living person without consciousness and life beginning. In the very first instance, just folded in potentiality. Yogic language, kundali, coiled up. All this potential is coiled up and unfolds, and we call this evolution. So with fun, people ask me, do you believe in evolution? Seeing me in Ireland and equating me to some Catholic priest or something, or some religion whereby immediately there seems to be this juxtaposition and opposition, evolution or creation. You have to believe in one or the other. Well, firstly, I don't believe in creation because it gives us a problem. Where did you get the raw material for? Where was the second-hand shop God went to? And who made that? And then who made that? Who made that? So we are atheists with regard to extra cosmic creation. And all these passages say, no such thing. Your pure consciousness is there, sitting there, and it's coming out, and you see it is observing rising and falling of the senses which are dissimilar to it. It was already there. It was ever there. What did it create? Some kind of creation in the sense of from itself, involved in itself, giving the clues to itself also. So we don't start off, I'm sitting here. Where is God? We start off with, I am here. What is that? What is the existent self? Please inquire about it. Ramana Maharshi spent his whole life asking this question. Who am I? Who am I? Relentlessly asking it until he got this understanding and realization. His path of viveka, discernment, discrimination, jnana. So we can get some clue about this. We can do away with the unhappiness by understanding that these senses through which we look and receive our unhappiness or our reactive unhappiness. They are dissimilar from the self, which is always in a state of equilibrium, never coming, never going, always pure, purely existent and conscious. And then to understand that these states, the state of unhappiness only occurs in one area of our experience, and it is the crudest of all areas. The more subtle area, more truthful area, more creative area is what we call dream. What is this world, therefore, and this product? The product of a cosmic dream. Where does it come from? From a creative cosmic mind that projects it. You can say creates it if you want, for convenience sake, creates it from its own mind, but not in a separate way. Be part and parcel of it. To illustrate this, the mind is superior to the organs. If the mind is the queen of the organs, where the mind goes, all the organs go. People say, how can I control lust and greed and all these things? Will I stop eating? No, it all comes from the mind. It's a psychological condition. Isn't it the psychological condition? Isn't it the mind that controls the hand? Is it the mind that controls speech? Is it the mind that controls our thinking? Is it the mind that controls our walking, our waking? The intellect is superior to the mind. The mind can be reactive, and part of the mind is instinctive mind, habit level. All behavior is learned behavior. What we call evolution is just a compilation of learned behavior over time through all the variations of species till we arrive at a cumulative knowledge called human. So what is superior to the senses? The mind. If we can control the mind, we control the senses. But the mind itself has to be controlled how? By understanding. We'll only do that through the intellect. It is the intellect that we have to control. And that intellect is buddhi. Therefore, Buddha is one of enlightened intellect. And how do we do all this? We do it by cleaning. So with a fun the other day, I said, you see, if you think my job is a Swami or my job is a human or my job is this or that, I can tell you my occupation is cleaner. I fill out a government form, occupation, cleaner. What is my job? Cleaning the body, cleaning the mind, that's all. Leave health to itself. Clean the body, clean the mind. This is God's temple, God's body, clean it. There's a story like that I tell, you may have heard it previously. There was a great king. There was a story we have to say once upon a time. Once upon a time, there was a king. And he had this huge hall. And he thought, this is a bit dull. What I need really is, of course, it's beautiful because it's marble. So it's marvelous, if you like. So we have two sides of the hall. So how to make this grand? And he heard, don't ask about the historical accuracy. It's just a story. He heard about this great Sistine Chapel with all these angels and beautiful decorations there. So he made a competition. I want to engage the two most reputable artists. Come. And you take this one side, you take this side. And what we'll do is we'll make a competition. I have a bag of money here, and you can take it as a prize. You'll be wealthy beyond your wildest dreams. All you have to do is you have to make the best painting. So the one painter brings out his easel, erects his scaffolding, starts his work, brings students in, you're allowed to do that. Michelangelo did it. You think Michelangelo painted all of this? No, all his students did it. He just drew it out, and then what is called punching, he made holes, outlines. And then with charcoal, you can still see the charcoal marks. He made charcoal outlines. And then he said, all right, there your paint, go on. We think of Michelangelo laboriously on his back doing this detailed painting. No, he just did the outlines. And then, come on, students, you do it. So he was doing that, busy like that. And there you could see outlines of great Gandharvas, angels, and cherubims, and deities, and figures, and flowers, and gardens, and fountains, and great vistas, and mountains, and all this. He used his creative imagination as much as he possibly could. The other man had a very curious technique. He also erected a scaffolding, and he took a small trowel and started going like this on the marble continuously. At the same time, they had both finished, and the king walked in, and what he saw on the one side, all the beautiful scenery, mountains and gardens and fine, beautiful figures, and he was astonished. Then he looked on the other side and he saw, oh, it's a mirror. The person had just done some polishing, purifying, polishing this wall. It simply reflected the other man's artwork. No. And the king gave him the money because there was a bonus in it. When he looked at it, he saw these magnificent paintings, and the bonus was he also saw himself in the mirror. So we have to polish the mind. All spiritual endeavor to find this truth is a question of polishing the mind through understanding the intellect. Then what is higher than the intellect? Don't forget, the microcosm and the macrocosm are echoes of the same thing. So our microcosm has an intellect. On a personal basis, we have to do this. But in the grand cosmos, what is happening? There is the cosmic mind. The cosmic mind is called Mahat, the great soul. And this is managing everything. When we are able to tune into that cosmic mind, then we have understood that when we stand in that cosmic mind, we are standing in that dream phase. And superior to that is the unmanifested. Now we stand there when the senses have risen and fallen in a dreamless sleep state. From the waking state, described as a mere sleep. From God's point of view, standing with no other standing. So this unmanifest is superior to the Mahat, and the sense objects belonging to the same class as the senses are understood to be enumerated by the mention of the senses. When you say senses, you mean all of the senses. And the rest is as before. And by the word sattva, truth and purity, the intellect is referred to here. But superior to the unmanifest is the Purusha. One Purusha, who is pervasive. And the Purusha is a technical term, derived from two terms. One is from the Indra of a city, Puri, city. Lest you think that that poor thing is caught inside in a cage and can't escape and is limited. The other combined word comes in of Purna, my own name. Fullness is found everywhere with no borders. So Purusha, who is pervasive and is indeed without worldly attributes, knowing whom a man becomes freed and attains immortality. And immortality, happiness, perfection, these are all equivalent terms. So the commentator goes on, he is the source even of all pervasive things, such as space, and then mentions two terms, that alinga and linga derivatively means that sign through which anything is comprehended. All of these that are mentioned are signposts to something superior. This is superior to that, this is superior to that, this is superior to that. In that same way, the waking state is a sign that there is something that is combined and more subtle. And that is an indication of something that is united. And that is an indication of something that is witnessing it. So you use the term linga. Linga we see as a symbol of Shiva. Because Mount Kailash is there, Shiva is supposed to dwell on the top. But Shiva represents the absolute with no attributes. How can you imagine something with no qualities, no attributes? You have to make a symbol that infers its presence. So you have the linga. There are two children in a bath. One is a boy, one is a girl. There's only one way to tell the difference. There's a linga which is there. So that is, he is devoid of all worldly attributes. Ever indeed, yam, yatta, having known whom? From the teacher and the scriptures, of course. Then a man becomes freed. When? Even while living, he was already free. Nothing to cure, nothing to correct. Already perfect, already full, already free. Free from what? Free from the bondages of the heart, such as ignorance, etc. And when the body falls, in other words, when the waking state goes, then he, gachati amritadvam, attains immortality as well. So this part is to be construed along with earlier passages that this Purusha, by knowing whom a person becomes free and attains immortality, this is superior to the unmanifest. There's nothing beyond that. How can there be then any possibility of the vision of the incomprehensible is a question. So his form does not exist within the range of vision. Nobody sees him with the eye. And when the self is revealed through deliberation on it, concentration on, meditation on it, it is realized by the intellect, the ruler of the mind that resides in the heart. 3 states are mentioned: waking, dream, sleep. There's our 4th state. The 4th state is called meditation. In meditation, you can construct your own creative scene. Don't think that meditation is a blank. If you leave it as a blank, then sleep will come. Meditation is a highly active state. Make it creative. You don't ask a question when you look at a sunrise or sunset and admire the beauty. See, people in India, all over India and all over the world, go to Mount Abu, where all the Jain temples are and so on. And there they go there to see the sunset. From all over the world, they go to Darjeeling to see the sunrise. Can you ask anybody, oh, how long did you stay there to see the sunrise? Well, we saw it as it started peeking over the horizon and as it developed, and we all gasped and stood in wonder. And then when it was finished, when it was there, we still admired the mountain scenery, and then we left. Don't ask the question, when did you fall asleep? What opportunity is there to fall asleep? If you fall asleep, that's not meditation. Anybody can fall asleep. In the 1960s, they boasted 7,000 people meditated in Trafalgar Square. There's a certain system that says use a mantra to hit every thought that comes up. Make it dull. What will happen? You fall asleep. Another way of saying 7,000 people slept. It's much better to lie down and sleep than to sit and sleep. So the meditation is a highly active state. We can call it a planned dream. Dream you can't plan, but a meditation you can plan. You can take a journey. You can prepare a runway, an artistic, creative runway, to fly above the clouds where everything rises up in a suspension. Not sleep. So there are 2 difficulties in meditation, 2 myths. One is focus. It's like playing a piano here and playing one note continuously. It'd be a public nuisance. Freedom means you can play the whole range as you want, creatively, or not at all. It's up to you. But don't use this focus on one thing. No. The other myth is empty the mind. You hear all the time, oh, I find meditation so difficult. I can't empty the mind. Who said your mind was like a garbage can that you have to empty? It's a highly creative thing. Cosmic mind standing there wants to think. Even common sense will tell you the mind is there to think. So think, direct your thoughts in a way until only one thought remains. That is then meditation. So then the next passage will go on. When the five senses of knowledge come to rest together with the mind and the intellect too, does not function, that state they call the highest state. And going on to the 11th stanza, they consider that keeping of the senses steady as yoga. Don't say, oh, I practiced yoga for 30 years, so now I'm finished with it. No, you have to keep it up. Always be steady. If you don't do it, then you drag everything down again. One becomes vigilant at that time, for yoga is subject to growth and decay. Don't puff your chest out and say, yeah, I did tapasya and yoga. I've done it for 30, 35, 40, 50 years. No need to do anything more. And then finally, final one we will take. It cannot be attained through speech, nor through mind, nor through eye. How can it be known to anyone apart from him who speaks of it as existing? So that is, I hope you got something from these particular passages in the Kali Puja. Now, it is my habit, so I ask you to indulge me, at least to entertain one question. Nothing?
I have a question.
Oh, good. We have a question. All right.
You said about how the body in its pure state is ever pure and perfect. But my understanding was the whole point of the body is that it's ever changing, so it's not permanent, whereas the internal Atman is what's the perfect. So I was a bit confused about that point.
Yes. So your car is in perfect running order, designed well, and you have to maintain it like that. You can't have a car where a light comes up and you say, oh, the light must be wrong. No, the oil is depleted. So we have to go to the cause. You see, if you purify the body, it's because there is a way of looking at what you call the earth car. It's an instrument like any other instrument that is used in order to get this understanding of perfection. The body is your instrument, the mind is your instrument in a hierarchical order. The body is controlled by the mind. When we don't control the body by the mind or by reasoning or intellect or sense, common sense even, then disease comes in. If you say, I like sweet things, and then you say, okay, so it's only the body, I can feed it as I want. Would that be a common sense attitude? So this is a gift. You can put it in this way. From a dualistic point of view, you can say, God gave me a body. It's not my body, it's his. I have to look after it for him. I'm just the agent. That's all. Then that advances to a position where you say, no, actually it's God's body. He's running it. I'm just a kind of caretaker. And for what purpose? So that I can realize here's the owner. And I can realize once I do that, I realize, oh, he is me. I am the owner. I don't have a car so that you can go and take it for a ride. I have a car so I can take it. So in Ireland, where I go on journeys, 2.5 hour journeys and so on. Oh, Maharaj, aren't you tired? You travel so long. I said, I didn't do anything. The car did all the work. Why should I be tired? Are you tired? No, it's not my energy. I'm not using my energy. I did a cycle ride, 620 kilometers in 4 days. I never trained for it. Now I wish I had. Anyhow, aren't you tired? Weren't you exhausted? No. If I thought I am doing this, I'm making the effort. And if anxiety is coming in, I wish I was doing something else. Our primary anxiety, telling on our physical health, is doing something and wishing we were in another place doing something else.
But you have to be alert.
You have to be alert. Of course, you have to be alert. Yes. There are many alerts, and you have to be one of them. You have to be alert. Alertness is what is required. Another way of saying it is our attention has to be steered in a chosen way at all times. But invariably, when we leave it alone and don't do anything with it, then it goes off its own track. Imagine not having a Tesla car, so you're driving it yourself. And you say, it's all right, the car will drive itself. You'll end up in the ditch. So how do you drive a car is continuous adjustment. Same with the mind. You're continuously adjusting the mind, watching it, all going off here, correct it. Get into the habit of doing that. Now you drive a car, you don't even think about the corrections. Automatically it happens. You settle that on the habit level. That is spiritual practice. Spiritual practice, polishing the mind, steering the mind toward noble thoughts at every given opportunity, and every second is a given opportunity. A blank check never been used. One check comes 1 second. What did I put into it? You put all these seconds in line. I hate my neighbor's nose. I put poisonous tea. They did this, they did that. What a pity, etc., etc. What a bad world. Like that, 4, 5, 6 seconds go, all negative. Registering that, you put at least one more positive in. At least minimum that much to neutralize it. Play a game like that, game of guiding thought. When you do it in a specific way, it's called meditation. Meditation, taking stock of the mental condition, and in a planned way, making a beautiful scene, uplifting scene that culminates in a whole blissful suspension of existence itself, in pure being. That's called meditation. But it's based on knowing this hierarchy that we've mentioned. That the objects are superior to the senses in this sense, because it is to reveal the objects that the senses are there. But objects and senses are made from the same thing. Yesterday's tomato and pasta. And then what is superior to that? Manas, mind. Following the same Sankhya progression. What is superior to that? Intellect. Superior to that is that entity that stands by itself and doesn't move. We call this dreamless sleep. What is superior to that? It is the self. This Indra of the city that is pervading everywhere, we call it Purusha. This divine self, this kingdom of heaven within, this God that we worship in a separate way is actually within us and is that perfection that lies within. The kingdom of heaven is within, and the king also is in there. You can't have the kingdom without the king. That being there, all the other things operate. Like the queen bee, you take the queen bee away, everything has to move with it. All the bees move with it. So the bee is there, the bee of our material existence is the bee of the mind. We have to control it. Like if you control the engine and the steering wheel, you control the entire car. The hubcaps don't know anything about driving. All those parts are there, coordinated, so that you, separate from it, dissimilar from it, can go and drive it. And the rule in philosophy is anything that is combined from different component parts is not for its own good, but for the good of an independent user. And I can't find any exception to it. A car has various parts, not so it can drive itself. That's so you can drive it. Go from A to B, here and there. In that same way, we find ourselves crossing a border from a waking to a dream to sleep, and see it as a progression, Godward. And then value how can we exercise a hierarchical control And what is the maximum thing that will control everything? What is the master control that will control everything? We call this the intellect. That is cosmic mind.
Isn't the dreamless state we call Turiya? Or Turiya is different?
No, Turiya means fourth. Waking,
Oh.
dream, dream, sleep, 3. Turiya is fourth. You want to understand this, you study the Mandukya Upanishad, 12 stanzas are there only, with Shankaracharya's grand guru giving, Gaudapada giving a comprehensive Karika commentary on it. So because it is the last convincing philosophical card in the Vedanta asana that will convince you of the existence of this witness self. Turiya is the fourth, but we can add another one, meditation. We can say 5 states actually, because meditation has all the components of the dream. We can construct it ourselves, there's a difference. Until we get to a point where we go into that creative state, which we actually call yoga nidra technically, an alert state that is aware but is not asleep. You know, when you do all this yoga exercise, it culminates in shavasana, like a corpse. We have to be Shiva, not Shava. So, very often people go through this and it's so relaxing and so on and so forth, and you find somebody's snoring there, somebody's snoring there. That means it's not effective, because it should be yoga nidra, where we are absolutely aware and observationally aware of all the things that are happening without being engaged in it. And so that point is equivalent really to that point in meditation that is like a dreamless sleep, but with awareness. In dreamless sleep, we're not aware. Only after, we are aware, of course, but we don't know we are aware. If you go into a coma, or if you, by the way, nobody actually knows how anesthesia works, actually. They don't know why it should be there. They know the chemical explanation for it and all the rest, but why should you go into that state? We don't know. But in that state, there is an awareness. Consciousness is still there. And in a dreamless sleep, awareness of peace is still there. And furthermore, with near-death experience, you can gather all the stories and find out the absolute consistencies in all these stories of near-death experience. There's huge research on this. And that suggests very strongly that consciousness still has an observational capacity. It can observe the waking state without being engaged in it. Imagine. Typically, there's a feeling of floating in the ceiling and looking down, and there's the surgeon there, and the machine that is registering your cardiac activity is all at a standstill, is all on one thing, and everybody is running around trying to revive this. You previously registered you as a body there. And when you come back, oh, all right, the heart pumping again and so on, clinically dead. Clinically dead. No brain activity, no heart activity. And then you're able to recall in exactly detail every single detail in glorious technicolor and what the surgeon said and so on and so forth. So there's well documented now by several institutions. One is here in Oxford, I think. A professor in Oxford is famous for doing it. I can't remember his name now. But University of Virginia have a whole faculty dedicated to this subject, exploring the nature of consciousness to do with near-death experience, and also exploring the people's recall of previous lives. Both of these are seriously being researched. And while there's no proof of anything, there is a logical conclusion And you can only come to that one conclusion, really, having eliminated all the other possibilities very scientifically and very skeptically. That's a different subject. All right. So I don't know. I hope you enjoyed this.
Yes.
Very good. And thank you for joining me. We finish off there. No other questions. Om Shanti. Shanti.